So let's investigate how systems of government impact fairness and development. So we've got our summative task 1, pair research and presentation, and it's week 5. So we've got 1 week or a week and a half to achieve this task. So I'm going to give you some hot tips in making sure you can go through the process if you're feeling a bit bogged down. So you've chosen your question, and in this case, we're doing democracy. Okay, so to what extent is a particular country a democracy? Okay, so you've copied and pasted your question into the section, and then you've justified your question with a link to IB Learning, Global Issue, and Personal Connection. So I've talked about the connection of fairness and development, how that can be promoted through democracy by distributing power, and that it's a system to change which groups are in power, and that it seems like a good idea. However, that there's some problems with democracy. Then I've linked it to a global issue, and here I've introduced which country I'm going to talk about and how there's a question mark about weakening democracy in Turkey and the impacts for Turkey in the world. And then a personal connection, how sometimes, particularly as a young person, I felt that voting in democratic elections was a bit of a waste of time, a bit of an inconvenience. How much difference can I make? And so I really wanted to investigate democracy further beyond voting. Okay, so then you've got your guiding questions. What in particular do you want to find out? Here's where you have control over your process. So I've looked at, identified some features of democracy, and then I've created a question for each. So elections, okay, are there any unfair practices around the recent elections? Power, is there any limitations on president power? Courts, does the government tell the courts what to do, or are they independent? Media, can they criticise the government and say what they want? Minority groups, are there groups that don't have full equal rights? And are there political parties? And what's the lawmaking process like? Okay, so these questions would really help me to answer my question about how far is Turkey a democracy? Okay, now move to step 4. All right, here's where we get our where we're going to find our information and pop our key points. So to start off with, I've used a couple of sites to get started. I've started with a Turkish news site because I want to hear from Turkey itself. Okay, and so I've identified that the country has a multi-party system for a long time, that the president is starting to chair particular meetings that the prime minister used to. So he's taking more power for himself, and that there's a claim about this, but in the government-controlled media, it says that actually this move doesn't make the president more powerful. I'm like, okay, all right. So a bit of a hint that there's an issue with the powers of the president. Okay, so the next one I chose was the CIA World Fact Book, okay? And I've chosen Turkey, and I've gone down to governments, and I've looked at, okay, what type of government is it? All right. And then I've looked at a few things that might help me, particularly executive branch, okay, chief of state, okay, the president, okay, and when he was president from, and elections appointments, okay, he has a 5-year term, all right, and that there's a prime minister, but he's appointed by the president, and then down to judicial with the courts, okay, that the judges' selection, okay, and that they are selected, 12 are selected by the president. So the president chooses the prime minister, the president chooses the judges. Okay, so this is showing there's lots of power for the president. So I've copied and pasted these key elements that help me understand the limits of power, the independence of the courts, and the power of the president. All right, and then my third one that I chose was a New York Times article. Just typed in to Google, how far is Turkey a democracy? And I chose this link. So it's here talking about Erdogan's next target as he restricts Turkey's democracy. So it seems really relevant, okay? And the internet, all right, so he's targeting kind of communication and social media. All right, so here I skim down and find out, according to this New York Times American-based perspective, that he's rolling back democracy. okay? And that he has a range of targets, and one is coming up.